Hi there, Dr. Anna Maria Helt, herbalist and microbiologist here at Osana Natural Health. And welcome to Monday's Mushrooms, episode 22. So winter is approaching here in the Rocky Mountains. We've had a little bit of snow in town, not too much that's hanging out, but the peaks are beautiful, white, getting snow covered. And this does not mean that it is the end of mushroom foraging season. So there are what I like to think of as winter mushrooms that you can forage. And my focus today will be on a few conks that are actually fairly widely distributed, but very common here in the Rockies. Now, to be clear, conks are actually perennial fruiting bodies. They tend to be hard. They're shelf fungi growing on logs and trees and such. So they hang out and grow year after year after year, but this means that they are available in the winter. Now, when you are harvesting conks, you don't want to go out and just yank the biggest one that you see off of a tree. Artist conk, for instance, or red-belted conk, both of which are common here, they can get quite large. And when you find a big one, that could be decades old. There are conks I've encountered that are likely older than me, and that's saying something. It's disrespectful to go rip those conks off, even though you're not killing the fungal organism, which is actually residing in the woods. That fungus put a lot of effort into growing those large conks. So if you are going to go out and forage conks, always know what you're foraging, right? 100% know the identity of your mushroom, but go for small ones, or else find, medium-sized ones, and you can cut the outer edge, the fresh growth off of that conk, and then leave the conk there to continue growing. Make sure that you sterilize your clippers with some very strong alcohol, like 70% ethanol, or some Everclear, maybe something like that, so as not to possibly infect that conk. And with that said, let's meet a few of these conks. So I'm going to talk about 3 species of conks today, not in great detail, but just some nifty things you can do with them in the winter. This is a very old, beat-up Ganoderma applanatum, or artist's conk. I found this many years ago, actually in the aughts, on the ground in California. It was shortly after I took my first ever medicinal mushroom class, and we learned about the species along with other Ganoderma species, and lo and behold, there it was when I was out on a hike. And not only that, this one has a rock incorporated into it. So it's been a good luck charm and erstwhile paperweight on my desk for many years in many homes. This has passed through a lot of hands. You can see fingerprints actually on the bottom. It's called artist conk because the bottom starts out white and will turn brown when you scratch it or draw on it. This one's no longer white underneath because so many people have held it and passed it around. So I still have it. It is falling apart. Ganoderma applanatum. Applanatum means planar or flat. And in fact, in Japan, one of the common names for this mushroom is powder-coated monkey bench. Monkey bench because it looks like a bench when it's growing out of a stump or a log or a tree. Powder-coated because when the spores fall out of the bottom of this, an electrostatic interaction, basically static electricity, pulls them around to the top. So there's this layer of kind of cinnamon brown colored spores on top. It looks kind of like Ovaltine actually, but more finely granulated. So powdered covered monkey bench. This is related to perhaps the better known Ganoderma lucidum or reishi mushroom, Lingzhi, but this is our local version of that here in the Rockies, although this one actually is from California, like I said. Another conk I'm going to talk about is red-belted conk. Now in the Rockies, what we have, as far as people know, is Fomitopsis shrinkii. There are 3 other Fomitopsis species in North America. Really pretty conk, hardwoody conk. There are 3 other Fomitopsis species in North America. However, when you look at older guidebooks, you'll see them all referred to, or a lot of them referred to, as Fomitopsis pinicola. Turns out that that's actually a European species that our North American species were named after because they do look similar. So same genus, but we actually have our own species here in North America. And like I said, the one we have here in the Rockies is Fomitopsis shrinkii. And more sampling will reveal whether we have additional species here or not. They can look quite variable. And then finally, I'm going to talk about kind of a weird looking one. It looks like a chunk of burned wood. This is Phelinus tremulae, and it's named tremulae because it grows on our quaking aspen trees here in the Rocky Mountains, Populus tremuloides. All of these are saprophytic mushrooms. They eat dead and dying wood, but this one in particular can also be parasitic, so it can infect living trees. Normally sickened or older trees, but when you think about the stress that our forests are under here in the West, the drought going on and bark beetle and stuff like that, normally native, or what I should say is native saprobes and parasites can start to possibly be more of a problem. So the Forest Service really doesn't like this fungus. It's considered a disease fungus. When I harvest it, I actually put it in a plastic bag and seal it so that I'm not spreading spores in the woods. Normally I like to spread spores in the woods, right? We mushroom foragers want to spread those chanterelle and bolete spores around. But for this one, because it can be parasitic on aspens and because of the drought stress, I put it in plastic, like I said, while I'm walking out. So it looks like a chunk of burned wood. The pore surface is normally dark, and then the spores are a creamy white color for this one. Here's a smaller one. So again, it looks like burned wood. Here's the pore surface that points down, and another little one. So Phelinus tremulae, also known as aspen bracket or false tinder polypore, because there is a true tinder polypore that was used as tinder or is used as tinder. This one resembles it but is a different species. So these are the three we're going to jump into. You do want to know what you are harvesting if it's something you plan on ingesting. Like I said, I can't emphasize how important that is. That means knowing what species of tree you're harvesting from, so you can get a sense as to what species you can expect there, doing things like spore prints and other steps of identification that I'm not going to get into here. This isn't really a mushroom identification video. So read more about these species, get local guidebooks that are specific to your area, and go on forays to learn what's by you. But these are great fungi that are available in the winter because they are indeed perennials. Now, for all of these, you're not going to chew on them, right? But you can use them in creative ways. Now, maybe this isn't so creative, but you can make a tea out of them, which means you're going to chop them up and simmer them for a while on the stove. For just a simple beverage tea, if you're not looking for the medicinal qualities of these guys, you just simmer it for 5 minutes and then let it steep longer. But for going after more of the medicinal qualities of a hard mushroom like a conk, instead, you're going to simmer it for an hour to 2 hours or so. In Chinese medicine, when roots and conks and such are being used for medicine, they'll be simmered for many hours. But I don't want all of the aromatics of these to go away completely, especially for aspen bracket. Fresh extracts of this can actually smell somewhat like root beer because it contains things like methyl salicylate and perhaps methylbenzoate, both of which are found in the host tree, the aspen. So it may be that the fungus, the fruiting body, is pulling those chemicals out of the aspen trees, or it could be that it's synthesizing itself. But if you cook this mushroom for hours and hours, you're going to miss those lovely aromatics in terms of the aspen bracket. So anyway, you can use these as a tea to sip on, and I actually like the flavor of the tea of these. Not everybody will. They might taste a little funky to you. So in that case, you can spike that simmering tea, that decoction is the technical name for that, with things like ginger or cinnamon or cardamom, make kind of a chai out of it to improve the flavor and to warm it up a bit for the cold months. Now, another use for that tea, that decoction, is using it as the basis of a soup or stew broth. So you can maybe mix it with some vegetable broth, or if you're an omnivore, some chicken broth or something like that, maybe half and half for a really healthful broth as a part of your chicken noodle soup, or as a base for your bisque or whatever soup or stew you happen to be making. And you can even freeze these mushroom teas in ice cube trays. and then pop those cubes out and store them in something airtight in the freezer so that they don't pick up the stink of everything else in your freezer. And then you can just take out however many cubes you want to throw them into the soup for flavoring. You can also cook these down, and so boil them down for a long time in chunks, and then don't let them get completely dry. Wait till there's boil it down till there's not that much water left, and then grind up everything, the conch and the water, in your blender, and then let that paste dry. Maybe if you have a food dehydrator, or even doing this in your oven on the lowest setting, taking care not to burn it. Now you have a mushroom powder. You do want it to be cooked, like I just described, so boil it down. But now you have a great mushroom powder that you can use as flavoring. So for instance, artist conch powders like that are used in various parts of Asia to add an umami flavor to vegetables, and again to soups and stuff like that. So you can do that with all of these as powders. Let's see, what else? So those are actually some of my favorite ways to use conchs as food. You're not going to just get a fork and eat these things, right? They're too hard. Although Diane Fossey in her book Gorilla in the Mist has a couple paragraphs where she's talking about artist conch in Africa and how the gorillas will eat this. They love it. And so little baby ones will hang out on the tree and chew on the conch on the tree itself. Stronger ones those individuals will actually snap the conch off the tree and run off with it and hide to get to eat it themselves. And then the main head honcho, the silverback himself, can just steal it from whomever he wants and eat it. So they like it, but they've got the teeth and the jaws that will let them bite it. We're not biting this thing. And in fact, when I'm processing small artist conchs, I will use a hatchet to chop them down at first before I get my clippers out, because it's hard. It's like wood. So of course, I have to point out that eat at your own risk whenever you're dealing with wild mushrooms, including conchs. Just be careful. Most conchs around here, as far as I know, are safe, but people can have idiosyncratic reactions. It's much like, you might not be able to eat nightshades, and your best friend can eat the hell out of tomatoes with no problem. So just pay attention, start with small amounts, but also very importantly, being anything less than 100% sure in terms of what you are harvesting is not enough before ingesting it. Especially with some of the fleshy mushrooms, not being 100% sure can earn you a dirt nap. So I don't take this lightly. With that said, moving on, let's get into aspen bracket or false tinder polypore. I don't feel like anything should be named false anything, so I like the name aspen bracket better. Phalenus tremulae is the Latin, again with that tremulae reflecting the fact that its main host is aspen, Populus tremuloides, like I said. Now, these are some little ones that I collected. And to be honest, there is not a lot known about this particular species with respect to, say, medicinal uses or food type uses. I mean, obviously, you're not going to chew on it. And so I'm starting with this one because of that. Now, so there's little on this one in the ethnomycological literature. And I am wanting, maybe at the next conference I go to chat with some other mushroom nerds to see if they've been playing around with this. One traditional use that has been well documented, though, is in Alaska and the Yukon. And so there is indigenous use there where it's used together with tobacco to enhance tobacco's effects, which I find interesting. So I don't know if it's that there are constituents of this fungus that are, I don't know, increasing the half-life or doing something to tobacco chemistry itself. Or is there something in this mushroom that itself is, for instance, stimulating or has other effects that nicotine has in tobacco that have additive effects? Don't know. But that is pretty much the only traditional use involving ingestion that I've seen of this. And I find that interesting because this is quite common. And I'm like, well, why is it not showing up in the literature? Is there something about it that means we shouldn't be using it? Don't know. So a student in the mushroom cocktail and mocktail class I taught at the Good Medicine Confluence this year, 2022, has actually been using the tea as a circulatory stimulant and for menstrual cramps, and those two are related. One can help the other, meaning circulation can be helpful for slow starting annoying cramps. She was also using it for respiratory stuff. So I keep meaning to start experimenting on myself with this mushroom, to just play around with it. I do use it as a beverage tea sometimes, but I haven't gotten around to that yet. I do use it, like I said, as a beverage tea. For me, it's been fine. Doesn't mean it's fine for you. I've not run into any problems. I also make an infused oil out of this and a hydrosol that I like in perfumery. And it's interesting because a fresh extract of this mushroom has a slight root beer scent and taste, and that's likely due to the chemicals methyl salicylate and methyl benzoate, which have kind of a wintergreen type scent and flavor, and either the fungus may be synthesizing that itself or else picking them up from the aspen host that makes them. Now, there are related Phelinus species that are actually quite closely related to Phelinus tremulae, genetically speaking, especially one called Phelinus igniarius, but also the other one, Phelinus linteus, is pretty closely related. Now, these two have seen heavy medicinal usage elsewhere in the world. So in China, for instance, in Japan and Korea, these latter two species have a long history of use for staunching bleeding, but also for blood moving. And that is not unusual in the botanical world, where something can actually be useful to slow down heavy bleeding, but also useful for promoting healthy circulation. There's a history of use and some research around usage in cancer. And there is use for stimulating good digestion. There has been use for liver support, including in terms of alcoholism and for, quote, detox. Use for arthritis and inflammation, which actually then brings methyl salicylate and methyl benzoate back to my mind, because those do have anti-inflammatory qualities. There are some steroidal compounds as well that research suggests may be useful for arthritis. These mushrooms have a history of use for allergies and as a tonic and many other uses. So just going through the history and actually contemporary traditional usage for those other species. In fact, Phelinus linteus has quite a bit of research on it and compared to other medicinal mushrooms. Now, this does not mean that aspen bracket or Phelinus tremulae has those same uses. I'm just not seeing a lot of documented internal usage of this other than as part of a smoking blend and what I've heard from that one student. So stay tuned on that. Now, just touching on the energetics before moving on, Phelinus igniarius, traditionally speaking, is considered sweet, slightly bitter, and cooling. Now, to me, Phelinus tremulae also tastes somewhat sweet and slightly bitter as well. Phelinus linteus is documented as cooling, and if you're not really into mushroom and plant energetics like that, don't sweat it. But if that is something you do consider, if you're, say, a practitioner, there you go. They're both cooling, the species that have been documented in terms of their energetics. Moving, so here's one last little look at aspen bracket. This is a polypore, and if you look closely, you can see a bunch of little tiny white circles in this image. Now, the polypore surface here is actually darker in color, but because the spores, the mushroom spores the mushroom uses to spread to other hosts, are a creamy white color. So you can see the pores kind of stuffed with those white mushroom spores here. All right. And then here's one big giganto aspen bracket on an actual old aspen tree. And this aspen bracket is so old that it's got moss growing on it. Now, like I said, this is saprophytic, but it's also parasitic. And parasites and saprobes actually have a normal and important function in forest recycling, but when you have a stressed forest, that balance can be tipped to being quite damaging. Now, that said, again, this mushroom, this fungus is, in terms of its actions on the tree, provides nesting sites for various species of birds. So it's not that parasites are bad, but there is concern about this one, especially with the drought that we are in the West, where the tree's resistance to these things, or the balance that normally exists between a tree and its natural parasites, is upset. So I do put this in plastic bags and seal it if I'm out harvesting it. And I don't harvest the great big ones like this. I go for the little ones that are a little more fresh. No, this is not, oh God, brain, don't do this to me. This is what happens when you get older. What is the conk, everybody? It's not really a conk. What is the really popular one on birch? Oh God, I'll come back to it later. I think I've had too many head injuries. I'm really struggling as late to coming up with names. Chaga, good Lord, chaga. People confuse this with chaga. This is not chaga. They're completely different. In fact, this here fruiting body is fertile. This is completely different than chaga. So I just wanted to point that out. All right, time to get back on the ginkgo and lion's mane for me. Let's get into red-belted conch. So red-belted conch, Fomitopsis schrenkii, what we have here in the Rockies, is it can be amazingly variable in its appearance. Here you're seeing like a faint reddish orange belt close to the edge of the conch, and then that white layer on both of these conchs on the outer margin is the new growth of it. So that will be farthest away from the log that these grow on. These you'll tend to find on conifers, but you'll see them sometimes on some other trees around here. Red-belted conch, I actually love this conch. I use it in my own daily formula for digestive support for my gut, and I do see that it helps me. You will sometimes see this on aspen, another saprobe, occasionally parasitic. I will often see these on logs that are laying on the ground, and occasionally on upright stumps, and that speaks to its, I would say, feeding habits and ecology, but I'm not going to get into that right now. In contrast to Felinus species that I mentioned, this one is more warming and actually moistening. It's slightly bitter when you taste it. There's also a sweetness to it. Sweet indicates tonifying effects in traditional Chinese medicine. There's some astringency to this, meaning that it can kind of firm up tissues. That might be why it's helping my digestive tract, TMI there. There's also kind of a sharpness to the flavor of this mushroom, and actually to its scent as well. And there are other herbalists out there who enjoy this as a tonic beverage with some other tasty stuff mixed in with it, like ginger, for instance. We have multiple of these species in North America beyond red-belted conch, but it looks like they're all used fairly similarly. And this is just pointing out the variation in what this conch can look like. So people might mistake this here for artist conch due to that thick white margin there. Actually, the thickness of that margin can vary in my experience with red-belted conch as well as artist conch, that new growth. But that brownish color you're seeing here, but if you were to scratch that white new growth on red-belted conch, it will stay white. If this were artist conch, it would turn brown. So one of the multiple ways you use in identification. Here's another one that looks quite different, really cool. This one was huge. On a downed log, a little bit higher up in elevation, about 10,000 feet. So red-belted conch, regardless of what Fomitopsis species we're talking about, is used on multiple continents for digestive stuff, like I said. And for instance, GI tract inflammation was a use in multiple indigenous cultures here in North America, and the eclectic practitioners also used it for this, and they probably learned it from people that already resided here in North America before they showed up. Also in Europe, China, Korea, India, used for digestive support, loose stools, even dysentery, depending on where. In liver, red-belted conch there has been used for liver support. And in Korea and China, their red-belted conks there have been used as a tonic for general well-being, as a tea usually, and also for blood sugar regulation. So I just find it really interesting that even though there are different species on different continents of Fomitopsis, there are a lot of similar uses. It doesn't mean it's used identically everywhere. Lots of other uses. I'm just giving you a brief idea of some of the wide range of traditional usage that this fungus has seen. Also for allergies as well, for blood moving, for arthritis and kind of cold, achy joints, some other of the traditional uses. So just pointing out a few things on this. This isn't meant to be comprehensive, but this is something you can find in the winter. Just don't yank off a big one like this one on a tree. That's a very old conch there. Here are some little baby ones just starting to grow here of Fomitopsis. So those little white blobs that you're seeing. And in fact, as you'll see momentarily, artist conch, very young conchs growing, can resemble this as well, these white blobs. So let's move on to artist conch, Ganoderma applanatum. The reason this is called artist conch is that white polypore surface, when you do scratch it or handle it, will turn brown. So if you look on the left-hand side of this largest one here, underneath you'll see an X scratched into it, and it turns brown. That will not happen with red-belted conch. So Ganoderma applanatum. And again, you can see, even though this one's flat on top, it's got some shape to it underneath, whereas others, like these guys that are actually close to the ground, really do look like a bench. They're flat on top and flat underneath. And I have my car key here just to give you a sense of size. So these two suckers were pretty big conchs. Did not harvest them. I just left them alone. That key ring you're seeing there is probably 3 inches in diameter, just so you can see just how big these guys are. So I have seen some folks refer to artist conch as warming, but most of the references and my own experiences, it's more cooling, and it's used in Chinese medicine to clear heat and also phlegm. Now, this is used, yet another fungus that is used on multiple continents, Ganoderma applanatum, used around the world to strengthen the immune system. So it's been traditionally used for people who get sick a lot, but also used for people who have a bit of a deranged, as it were, immune system. So maybe they have allergies or other things going on. Used in Africa and Chinese medicine, and amongst multiple indigenous groups in Alaska and in the Himalayas for respiratory support. Used in Africa and in Chinese medicine and in India for cardiovascular support. So again, multiple continents here. Used for people who are coming out of a long-term illness, who've gotten their butt kicked. So for convalescent folks, that's seen in Tanzania and Nigeria and parts of Asia. Used for liver support as well. Many other conditions as well, blood oxygenation. So again, an extremely useful fungus. As with the rest of these, you do want to do more research on identifying it, on possible contraindications, and on usage for yourself before doing any playing around with it. What else do I want to say about this one? I think I'll just show a couple more pictures. Here's a new one just getting going, that white growth. So this is possibly a first year one getting going. It hasn't really formed its hard brown surface yet. That forms as this grows year after year and gains ridges, like this one here. So you can see that new growth on the very outer edge, and then you can see the older part of the conch all lumpy and ridged up closer to the tree stump that this was on. This one was probably 10 inches or so across, and it definitely is not one that I would harvest, just out of respect for how much it took for that to grow. Thank you for tuning in. As usual, if you have questions and comments, please leave them in the comments section. I do read all of them and try to respond to all of them as well. And happy holidays to everybody. Happy winter. Stay healthy. And tune in next time for the next Monday's mushroom episode, the topic to be determined. Actually, if any of you have a request about fungal topics that you would like to hear about, let me know in the comments because I'm happy to nerd out on what you want to nerd out. Okay, take care, y'all.